I think these attacks on Crimea are part of a Ukrainian desire to disrupt and send various messages, and they're obviously doing quite a good job at it.
Good to have you back, Tim. Now, we've seen then, haven't we, in recent hours, how another military installation in Russian-occupied Crimea. Crimea has been hit by Ukrainian forces, several large explosions reported. Something of a pattern developing here. What do you read into what's going on, Tim?
Actually, I think it's really quite interesting. It is a bit of a pattern. There have been other attacks on the Crimea, and some aircraft were taken out recently. On the main offensive front, things have really just sort of settled down, in inverted commas. Neither side is making much progress in terms of capturing territory. And the Ukrainians are certainly not in a position to conduct major counteroffensive operations. So I think these attacks on Crimea are part of a Ukrainian desire to disrupt and send various messages. And they're obviously doing quite a good job at it. What is interesting, and I think in some respects you could argue quite worrying, is that in September, Russia will conduct this annexation of the two eastern provinces that they occupy. And as far as they're concerned, of course, Crimea is Russian territory, not Russian occupied territory. So these two eastern provinces and and Crimea will be considered to be Russian territory, and therefore Ukrainian attacks on that territory could ramp up the response from the Russians, not just necessarily in ground operations, but in their responses in other ways.
I wonder what that might mean. I guess we can only speculate. It's obviously a concerning thought. If the Russians view these attacks on Crimea as a significant escalation and then may react, as you suggest, in kind, I wonder what that response might conceivably look like, Tim.
Well, it could be a number of things. I think most worrying one, and I can't remember, I think we may have discussed this before, but Russian doctrine, tactical level doctrine, i.e. battlefield doctrine, for defending Russian territory includes the use of tactical nuclear weapons. So there's no doubt at all that that's an option. Now, I still am pretty reluctant to believe that the Russians would use tactical nuclear weapons, but it is nonetheless part of their doctrine. And if they feel they are under threat, then they would be prepared perhaps to use it. Also, of course, if they then use the attacks on Russian territory to ramp up it at home and then declare this to be, Russia is now under attack, we need to mobilize, we need to gather more forces, et cetera, that could then ramp up their response in terms of the size and shape of their military capability. Yeah. They undoubtedly are also having to think through how they're going to counter these long-range artillery systems that the Ukrainians have got. We've got the HIMARS, but also the MLRS. We've just announced doubling the numbers, the M222 270 millimeter rockets that are being used to great effect. And some of those, I think, will be being used against Crimea, certainly against the bridges. They're being used against ammunition dumps and logistics, and the command and control centers that the Russians have got. So they've been suffering a bit under that, and I think they're going to have to find a way to respond. Actually, the obvious way is by air. But one of the most surprising things about this whole campaign is the lack of success the Russians have had in the air domain.
Yeah, so we are seeing the Ukrainians making use and making good use, it seems, of the kind of longer range weapons they've been getting from the West, including from this country. But when you see these attacks very far behind enemy lines, obviously, to Ukraine, this is Ukraine when you talk about Crimea, but it's certainly behind Russian enemy lines. Do you think only in terms of missiles and longer range weapons, or do you think maybe we're talking about, use of special forces, highly trained units on sabotage missions?
Yeah, I think there is a bit of that, but I do think we need to hold this in some sort of, not get carried away by it. The size and shape of the Ukrainian special forces and their ability to actually cause serious damage is relatively limited. The UK special forces are used for specific operations, as we use them in the Falklands and elsewhere, and undoubtedly the Ukrainians will be using that as well. But it's not going to change the dynamic of the campaign as a whole. It will cause disruption and affect morale and all sorts of other things. And I think one of the problems in the West is we do seize on what we see as good news about the Ukrainians. We mustn't underestimate how badly they are suffering. They're losing a lot of people, a lot of stuff. They're undoubtedly, doing a great job and so on. But in a campaign, in any military campaign, we talk about reaching a culminating point. And there's lots of debate about World War II. Was Stalingrad the culminating point, or was Kursk in the Eastern Front, and so on? I don't think there's any doubt that both the Russians and the Ukrainians are probably reaching some sort of culmination, and they are having to take stock, reconstitute, and therefore these use of long-range artillery, use of special forces, is trying to maintain momentum for the Ukrainians whilst they try to build up their military fighting power. And of course, we're training a lot of
Yes.
Ukrainians in this country, and other people are beginning to do that too.
And that could be a significant part of this developing picture, Tim, couldn't it? Because I read that we are training in this country 10,000 Ukrainian troops. That's quite a large number. And I wonder what kind of training they are being given.
Well, it is 10,000. That's the intent. We've trained about 1,500, something like that. Another 1,000 are under training now. But these are relatively low-level tactical fieldcraft training, weapon skills, and operating tactically on a battlefield. Which is not unimportant, clearly. And the Ukrainians are, on the face of it, trying to create, some people talk about 1 million strong capability, defense force capability for Ukraine. I mean, that's a big ask. And although this low-level tactical training is important, nonetheless, if they are going to go onto the offensive operations, they will need brigade level and divisional level commanders trained and prepared to conduct offensive operations, which are very different to conducting defensive operations. So the training that's going on is important. It will make a difference. But in terms of the overall campaign, I think we're talking, well, we are definitely talking, in my view, weeks, if not months, well, certainly months, actually, before the Ukrainians will be in a position to really conduct offensive operations, probably well into next year. I mean, this is a long campaign. It always has been that way, and it continues to be that way, notwithstanding what's going on day to day at that tactical level.